to Reform Gangsters Live. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon. I got a lot of really good content on there. So, check it out. Today's a very special day for me personally. On January 12th, 1989, I made one of the biggest decisions in my life. I decided to stop drinking and drugging. And I'm clean today, clean and sober, I guess you could say. I'm clean 37 years today, which is a miracle. My old sponsor called me today, and he was around for day one, and matter of fact, he was the person I called from the hotel I was locked in getting high, which is the Crosby Motor Inn, for all you out there in Ozone Park that are listening to me. And I called him from there, and he answered the phone by some miracle. And then I met him at my house on 88th Street. And, and he asked me a question. He asked me when was using fun, when was drinking and drugging fun. And, listen, I have to be honest. There was a time when it was fun. You know what I mean? I'm hanging out in the clubs at the Copa, drinking, partying, running around with Neil's son, living the high life. We had the keys to the city, man. And we had carte blanche. We didn't wait on lines. We got in any place we wanted. We saw any show we wanted, hanging out with celebrities, and then when I got introduced to the cocaine by a rock group, and then I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And, the last day, I'm in my house and I'm sitting on the couch with him, and he asked me a question. He said to me, when was using fun? And I said, it was fun when I was 19, 20, 21, in my early 20s, it was fun. Then in my mid 30s, it wasn't. It was terrible, and he said, okay, this is the situation. He said, in this room, there's a 19-year-old Anthony having a party. He said, in this room, there's a 35-year-old Anthony living in a nightmare. He said, the only key you have when you drink or drug, the only key you have is the key into this nightmare. You can never get back into this party. The party's over. And for those people out there that have struggled with addiction, they know the deal. Once you pass over that line into addiction, whenever you relapse, you go right back to the bottom, if not worse. You never, nothing ever feels like the first one anymore. The party's over. And I sat back on my couch, and, in 12-step programs, that's the first step. I admitted I was powerless over my addiction, and my life was definitely very unmanageable, and I sat back and I realized I was done. And I realized at that point, anytime I drank or drugged, I would be back in the Crosby Motor Inn, peeking out of the window, all messed up. And so I made a decision not to use no matter what. You know what I mean? No matter what went on in my life, I refused to drink or drug. And that's what I did for many years. I went to prison clean. I stood clean in prison. I refused to use. Because I knew that if I stood clean, I always had an opportunity to change. And when I made the decision to leave New York, to do what I did with the government, my recovery, my 12-step programs and my 12-step friends, helped with that decision. Not that they coaxed me. It was that I knew when I left New York, no matter where I went in the world, because, 12-step fellowships are worldwide. I don't want to particularly name one fellowship over another, because some people might get, like, oh, he can't do that, say the name of the program because it's anonymous, but we all know what I'm talking about. I knew they were worldwide fellowships. And no matter where I went in the world, all I had to do was go to a meeting and raise my hand, and I would have, friends immediately, so that played a part in my decision also, because I knew it made me feel a little safe, a little connected. I wouldn't be so disconnected. So, anybody out there struggling with addiction, if I could do it, you could do it. My suggestion is, get into a detox, get into a treatment center, make meetings, get into the 12-step fellowship, because I know they work. I mean, I see it every day. So, I want to thank everybody for everybody's DMing me and clicking onto my Instagrams and all my social medias hopping and popping. I want to thank everybody for congratulating me. I couldn't do it alone. None of us could do this alone. We need help. One addict helping another is without parallel. You know what I mean? We can't do this alone, and that's how we stay clean and sober. We help each other. So I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to this year. The year just started, and hopefully it's going to be a banging year. I got a lot of things on the fire, a lot of things coming your way. So we'll see what happens. Let me see. I think some DMs are coming in here. 37 years is almost unheard of. It's just a big number. It's a big number. But you know what? I have just today. I just got to get through today. Listen, even though I'm clean all these years, I go to Italian restaurants. I go to a nice restaurant, and I see these beautiful bottles of wine being carried out on trays like they're so like alone, and they're so respected, and and they look good and they smell good. You know what I mean? But I play that tape. If I have a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine and I get a little lit up on the wine, where do I go from there? You know what I mean? So like I just don't pick it up. So let me answer some of these questions. Palo from Scotland. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I watch all of your videos. I think you are so inspiring. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. I appreciate that. Francesco, question. In prison, can 2 made guys fight with no repercussions on the street, since you're not supposed to touch another made guy? Listen, there's always going to be repercussions. I know a lot of guys say the rules don't count in jail, but they count. You know what I mean? They count. I mean, you got to, you have to, if someone threatens you, you have to defend yourself. I mean, I would have, if I had any beefs with any made guys in there and they, and I felt threatened or they put their hands on me, I'd fuck them up. You know what I mean? And worry about it when I got out. You know what I mean? I guess that's the answer. But I never really I saw made guys have arguments, like heated arguments. I know, but I never saw 2 made guys go at it together, at each other. This is from Anthony. Anthony sending love from Buffalo. Go Bills. The Bills got the Broncos on Saturday. Did you or your father Tony Graziano, and he wasn't my father, he was a friend of ours who was a captain in the Banana family? If so, any stories? He was in jail with my father. He was in prison with my old man, he wasn't in prison. He was friends with somebody that was in prison with my father in Allenwood, and we would meet up a lot of times in the visiting room, him and I and the person he was visiting and my father, and we would hang out together and bullshit. So that's how I know Tony, and my old man was good friends with him. Were there moments where addiction made you a liability and you knew it? Made me a liability to myself. I mean, not real a liability as far as what to do what. You know what I mean? To cooperate? No. I didn't cooperate because of drugs. I didn't cooperate because I was a drug addict or I had a drug problem. Like some people out there want to say that he was a junkie and he's a rat and this and that. I was clean already. When I cooperated, I was clean almost 20 years at that point. So, drugs and alcohol had nothing to do with my decision. And I don't know what kind of liability you mean. If you could send in another DM about what you mean by a liability, in what sense, I would answer the question. But I don't really know. I was a liability to myself and to my family. Was sobriety respected, mocked, or feared in that world? Well, I mean, it was respected for the people. I wasn't mocked for it. I was. I mean, people were happy that I got clean and sober. I mean, John Gotti bought me a car, for God's sakes, when I got out of treatment. I was only out of treatment 3 days. And so they didn't understand it because it's funny, complete abstinence is the way to go, if you want to stay clean and sober. I mean, complete abstinence from all drugs in order to recover. I mean, that's in the literature, you know. And one night so when I got clean, I used to drive Tony Lee around. And one night we went to Brooklyn to this Chinese restaurant called Mahjong. He used to go there it was by this other club, the Seashell, that he used to hang out at, another Italian restaurant that was down the block from the Mahjong. Had a bar in it, and he would hang out in there. So we went to the Mahjong and we had dinner, and then we went over to the Seashell, and he was drinking. I was drinking club soda. I was already cleaner, maybe 3 or 4 months at the time, and he comes out of the restaurant, and we get in the car, and he tells me, "So let me ask you a question. Do you mean to tell me that me and you are never going to have a drink together?" Because he didn't understand like where that drink would take me. Alcohol's a drug, And I said, "Well, we're not going to have a drink tonight," And that was in the beginning of my recovery, and I did relapse after that. I had 6 months, and I relapsed for one night, and then I had 3 more months, and I relapsed again for one night, and then the third time I relapsed was what I talked about earlier. Was when I was in the Crosby Motor Inn. That was a little bit of a run. That was the last time, because I saw the light, And every time I relapsed was always because I didn't take suggestions, and I was in places I didn't belong, and I was with people that I didn't belong with, and doing things I shouldn't have been doing. People, places, and things, they will kill you. Let's see. What's the ugliest truth about getting sober that nobody warns you about? The ugliest truth? About how sick you really are. You know what I mean? Like when you put down the drinking, the drugs and the alcohol, you really realize how crazy you are. You know what I mean? Because, that's why there's 12 steps. It's a spiritual journey to heal you. I didn't realize how messed up I was till I got clean. Like I didn't realize that I had no skills. I didn't realize I had no Social Security, no 401ks. I mean, you know what I mean? I didn't realize that I didn't know how to do anything but to be a criminal. I didn't know how to deal in relationships. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be anything. I knew how to be a criminal. That's what I knew how to be. I knew how to rape, plunder New York City. I knew how to do that. I knew how to do all that. And I did it clean. And my sponsor used to tell me all the time, you're going to suffer consequences behind your behavior. So for me, the scariest part was finding out who I really was once the drugs and alcohol were gone. Did you lose people when you got clean? No. I gained a lot of people. I got lucky because, because of the world I came from, and going into the 12-step meetings, when I walked into my first meeting in the neighborhood in Ozone Park, thank God I knew some people in there that I grew up with, that I knew with criminals too at one time, and I met some ex-convicts in there that were in the same prisons I was in, and knew a couple of the same people I knew, so I latched on to them, and I felt very comfortable with them. So, and my father used to tell me when I used to go visit him, don't be telling them people in the meetings anything about us, and that kept me away from really working on myself for a long time, because if anybody knows about the 12 steps, the fourth step is, to take a personal inventory of yourself, and then the fifth step, to share it with God and another human being. And I wasn't ready to do that. You know what I mean? I wasn't ready to do that. And I suffered consequences behind that, because after a while, the materialistic things and all that stuff I was gaining, the money and the girls and the prestige and everything, and I still felt that pit in my stomach, that kept me sick for a while, clean. What's the biggest lie addicts tell themselves that keeps them stuck? I got this. I could do it on my own. I'm only doing this. I'm only going to do that. It's called denial. Francesca, are you going to have Louis Kasman back on the show like the first sit down? Most definitely. We just taped the show yesterday. It'll be coming out soon. It's being edited now. We just did a show yesterday. We're going to probably try to do at least one a week. So I hope everybody is going to enjoy them, because I enjoy them. Grunge, 90 music. I always asked who in their own crew would you be leery or throwing your hands against. I don't really know that answer to that. You know what I mean? I would fight with anybody. You know what I mean? If I lost, I lost. I wasn't afraid or in fear. You know, I mean, that wasn't even a thought in my mind. That wasn't even a thought in my mind. Let me see. Hold on, I got a donation. That's my friend who I can't pronounce his name. I wish I could. Thank you for the rag. I'm sorry. You got to DM us or something and tell me how to say your name. I feel terrible. You're always on, and I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you for your donation. What impact did your addiction have on your marriage to your wife? Was she okay with your drug use, or did she try to discourage you? You know, my first wife, she always tried to help me, but my family, they were sort of enablers. You know what I mean? Like my wife and my parents, because they loved me. You know what I mean? And they sort of enabled me to continue on that path because they didn't understand addiction. They didn't understand addiction. So. But it hurt my marriage because I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I knew how to get high. So yeah, I would say it upset them. It wasn't a good situation. This is from Grunge. JDV. Hey Anthony, did you know Anthony and Carmine DeVito? They were a bit older than you and always were at the club across the street from Aldo's. Anthony and Carmine DeVito, yeah, I mean, if they stood in the club, if they stood in JoJo's club, I had to know them, without a doubt. What's this? This is from Make the Most of It. You and Dominic Mantangelo, no longer with us, are two of the most forthright and truth-telling, non-egotistical former mob guys I've heard. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's from John. Hey, Anthony, was Sammy present when Ronnie One Arm got straightened out? No. Ronnie One Arm got straightened out when I was in jail. Ronnie One Arm got straightened out, I believe, when Ronnie One Arm got straightened out when I was in jail. And when I was in jail, Sammy and John were in jail at the same time in 91. So no, he wasn't around. To my knowledge, Sammy wasn't around when Ronnie One Arm got straightened out. From Jack the Ripper. Was Fat Andy upset with your alcohol and drug use? He wasn't upset. He was worried. At the end, he was very worried. And he was very happy that I stopped. Very happy that I stopped. What does a sober mind see in prison that an addicted mind misses? How destructive and how ridiculous it is to get high in there. And like in jail, you get tickets, for behavior and suffer consequences, and they take away your property. If you give them dirty errands, they take your visits, they take your commissary. When I was in Attica, and Attica is a crazy, crazy prison. I mean, it's violent, it's very high security, and people were using like crazy in there. I mean, they were getting habits in there. On Saturday and Sunday when the buses came up from the city, it was standing room only in the yard. I didn't go out to the yard on Saturday and Sunday nights. I went out in the day, and I stood in my cell at night and watched TV because I had a 13-inch TV in my cell, which is a really score that for those people that were in jail know having a TV in your cell is you're living large. It's great. And anyway, and I could have used in there all the time. I had money, I had connections, I could have got anything I wanted: dope, coke, crack, pot, anything. And one day there was this black kid. He was the porter on my block, on my unit, and he was broke. This kid had 25 to life. He shot a bodega guy. He was a kid, a young black kid. I felt so sorry for him, and he had no parents. I mean, it was tragic. And he used to sweep and mop the tier at night and give us hot water. Because in the cell, there's no hot water. You just got cold water in the sink. So that you have a pail, a bucket in your cell. And at night, you put it by your gate, and someone comes around and fills it up with steaming hot water so you could shave and, wash up out of the bucket. And that was his job. So I used to give him, he had no T-shirts. I used to buy him T-shirts, and I used to give him some commissary, give him a couple of packs of cigarettes, because I quit smoking, but I used to get him cigarettes now and then. And one day he came over to my cell and he wanted to give me a joint. And I said, no, thank you. I don't want it. He goes, man, I noticed. He goes, you don't get high in here. How come? I said, listen. I said, look at my cell. I said, I got a TV. I got 2 hot pots. I got a box window that's like a refrigerator in the winter. I got a nice robe on. I got a locker full of commissary. My wife and kids come up to visit me every month. Why would I sacrifice any of that to smoke a joint? That's addiction, because there are people that would sacrifice all of that to get high. And that's the disease of addiction. It's cunning, baffling, and insidious. But I was at the point where I knew, and what keeps me clean are consequences, because I know if I use, there's consequences. And I knew if I used, there would be consequences. And as comfortable as you could be in jail, I was. And I wasn't willing to suffer consequences just to smoke a joint or take a few lines of coke and give them a dirty urine. So that's what goes on in prison. That was a little long-winded, but that's the story. Let's see what else we got. This is from Chris Scott. Hi, Anthony. In The Sopranos, a soldier wanted to move to Florida, and they said no. So is it true people in that life can't move out of the area once they join? No, that's not true, but you definitely got to put it on record that you want to move. You know what I mean? And if the boss doesn't want you to move, you're not going to move. But I never knew of anybody getting told no. Everybody, my old man didn't get told no. He went to Florida. Eddie Leno was on his way to Florida when he got killed. The poor guy. He was going to be the captain down there. And everybody that was down there was replanted from up north, Boston, New York, Chicago. So I never heard of anybody getting told no, but you definitely have to put it on record and get an okay. Was Nikki the wig out of the Bronx, who's now on TikTok and looks 100? Was she had a bad ass back in the day? I don't know him, so I can't make a comment. I'm going to have to check him out on TikTok, and I'll get back to you. This is from Rob. Congratulations. Keep up the good work. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is from Slow Poker. Slow Poker. Anthony, do you remember the picture of Andre the Giant hanging on the wall in the waiting area of Tony Roma's in Howard Beach? I've been to Tony Roma's so many times. If you say there was a picture there, I can't remember it, but I'm sure there was. That was a good restaurant. Johnny, talk about the El Carib. I was working that night as one of the head waiters. I'm assuming you're talking about the night John Gotti had his first Christmas party as the boss. Um, you were working that night. You probably made a lot of money that night. I'm sure you got good tips from everybody. Um, the El Carib was, mobbed up there with Nikki. I don't know if they probably still are with Nikki. And John chose that place to have his first Christmas party right after, only like 2 weeks after he became the boss, after Paul got killed. They killed Paul, and then 2 weeks later they had a big celebration. Of course, the Wicked Witch was dead, and so yeah, that it was, it's a great club, it's a great place, they do a fantastic job, and it was a good night. I mean, we had a great time that night. A lot of guys, not many. I don't think there was one woman sitting at any one of the tables. I think it was just all guys. I think the only females in the building were the help, the servers. But yeah, I had a good time that night. Let's see. Anthony, why did John Gotti's barber Vito get hit? Tito got hit because Tito was the person that killed Frankie Burke, who was Jimmy Burke's son. That's why Tito got killed. Do you believe people can truly change or just learn to behave better? I know people can truly change, that's for sure. For addicts to behave better, I mean, it all comes together. If you truly change, you behave better. I don't think you could separate one from the other. I think you got to do a little of both. What's the ugliest truth about getting sober that people need to know? I already answered that question. The ugliest truth for me was that I didn't know anything. The insecurity that I found myself with, stuff like that. There's really nothing ugly about it. And the cravings, to get through the first couple of months, because, you've been using it for so many years. I mean, it becomes part of your being, and you have to relearn so much stuff, because you put the drink and the drug down. You got to relearn a lot of stuff. Let's see. This is from Grunge. The Steelers never lose at home on Monday night. Well, I hope they lose tonight because we got Houston. JD, yeah, that was my dad and uncle who have since passed away. They actually grew up directly next door to the Carrazas in East New York and were with them for their whole lives. Then I know them, definitely. I just can't place the name. If they lived next to JoJo in East New York, I mean, come on, I was there all the time. I was in that apartment all the time when I hung out with Anthony Carrazza, JoJo's brother. And I used to go see his mother, Mary. I just, I'm bad with names. I see names, and it's been so long since I saw these people and even heard their names. It's some things I recollect like that, and some things I don't. So if that's the case, then I definitely knew them. Vito Rizzuto died. Are you aware? I guess you're talking about the guy from Canada. Yeah, I heard about that. JD, my dad ran the horse parlor that JoJo got pinched for in 1992. I was in jail in 1992, but I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. Who's your father? Which which one was your dad? He's from my friend Rag again. Do you think if you were not an addict, you would have gotten made in the 80s or early 90s? You did work when you murdered your brother-in-law and so was qualified. Get me. When the incident happened, my brother-in-law, I was clean. I was out of treatment. That was in the first 6 months I was clean. So I was clean when that happened. And I get this question all the time. The drugs and the alcohol had nothing to do with me not having the ceremony, nothing whatsoever. Nothing whatsoever. The minute I got clean, I was proposed. When John became the boss. I was using, but I was in Florida a lot because my father was fighting this case. My father went on trial 3 times. So from 84 to 87, I wasn't really around much because I was going back and forth to Florida to take care of my father. There's 3 trials. And those were like my dark days. Those were really my dark days. But when I got clean, I was proposed in the very, very early 90s, in the early 90s. Well, right before Tony died. Tony Lee proposed me, or said he was going to propose me, and he died of stomach cancer. Then my father, I went up to see my father in prison. When I got out of prison, after Tony Lee died, I went up to see my father with Lenny DiMaria in Allenwood, and he told Lenny, what are they waiting for to straighten out my son? And then I got proposed officially at that point. And then I got arrested. I got arrested in 95 on a big bookmaking case. And the day before I went away, they had a going away party for me at Cafe Liberty. And I went outside with Skinny Dom, who, my fake ass friend, Skinny Dom. I went outside with Skinny Dom, and he told me, because I knew everything went around, because I had seen Vinny Asara, and I saw a couple of other captains in Brooklyn, and they told me they saw my name on the list, and I was good to go and all that. And Dominic told me as soon as I had a 2 to 4 at that point, so I only thought I was going to do like 2 years and change. I didn't know I was getting indicted by the feds yet. So Dominic took me outside and said to me, listen, as soon as you get out, you're going to get straightened out. We're going to have the ceremony, so don't worry, just because we didn't have it yet, you're going to get, as soon as you get out, you're going to get straightened out. On the assumption I was getting out within 2 years and so around that area. But when I went away, I got indicted by the feds, and I got another 10 years, and 2 years went to 8 years and 3 months. And while I was in there 8 years and 3 months, a lot of things happened. My father died, John Gotti died, Pete became the boss who didn't love me. Me and Dominic had a falling out. He didn't love me. They took everything. When my father died, they took everything, the scumbags. They took my son's insurance money. Pete shook me down for $1,800 because he was too much of a punk to get it off my father. And I could go on and on and on and on and on. While I was in jail, at the end of my bid, Nicky had me transferred from that, which he looked out for me, Nicky, and I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I'm sure he's not happy with me because I cooperated, and I don't blame him. If I was him, I wouldn't be happy with me either, and he looked out for me. I met with another wise guy, Nunzi, I heard, who just passed away. I'm sorry to hear that. I knew his wife and his family very well. They were good people. I like Nunzi. I met him on Metropolitan Avenue and in a little diner and a little luncheonette. And he told me, that I'm with Nicky now. He transferred me to them, and he was going to service me, and they put my name back in to get straightened out of respect for my father. That's what he told me and me. And I said, okay. And then about a year, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, then Lenny sent for me, who was a captain. I made arrangements to see Lenny. And he said to me, I said to him, what's going on? He goes, listen, Jackie Knows at that point was the acting boss, and Jojo was, I believe, the consigliere. And he said, Jojo and Jackie Knows, we're going to have the ceremony very soon. Everything's approved. You're in. You're getting made. We're going to have the he gave me permission at that point. He goes, you got permission to go sit down for yourself. You don't need any representation anymore. Consider yourself a friend. We just didn't have the ceremony yet. And I said, fine. And then 5 days later, I got arrested for murder. That's the story. So I did not in any way, shape, or form not get straightened out because of drugs and alcohol. So anybody that says that is a fucking liar. I did not, again, I repeat, that had nothing to do with me not getting straightened out. It was just that every time I was supposed to get straightened out, I went to jail. Okay. Okay, let's see what else I got here. I don't want to jump ahead too much. Oh, Raj. Okay, Raj. R-A-J. Okay, all right, Raj. Sorry. Okay. 604 Flex. Hey, Anthony, what was your father's friend Mikey Gal like? We could talk about that for days. He was all right. He was who he was. He was I don't want to talk bad about him. He was Tony's brother, but he wasn't the sharpest pencil in the box. He did the wrong thing by me when I went to jail after my father died. He chimed in with Dominic and Freddie Hart, taking everything from us. Not giving my mother any money. He didn't do the right thing either. So I have nothing good to say about him. I'll put it to you that way. Mosey boy, good afternoon, Mr. Ruggiano, a friend. A huge congratulations on 37 years. Thank you, I appreciate it. Gianni, best restaurant in Pompano Beach. You saw me there? I was there on New Year's Eve with my daughter. I like that restaurant. Who's this? All right. I don't know who you are, but I guess you spotted me. You should have said hello. You should have said hello. The next time you see me, say hello. My daughter gets a kick out of it. When people recognize me. She thinks it's cool. So next time you see me, especially if I'm with my daughter, make sure you come say hello. What's this? Oh shit! I just lost something. Devine, Pittsburgh. Anthony, thoughts on John whacking Willie Boy? Oh, come on, that was a given. Once they exposed Willie Boy as an informant, that was the end of him. He had a lot of balls hanging around Brooklyn. I mean, they must have really rope-a-doped him. He must have really believed that if he didn't testify and hurt anybody, they were going to give him a pass. If I was him, I would have been long gone. If I had that opportunity, I don't know how that happened. How he allowed that to happen, unless maybe he committed suicide. He knew that he was going to get clipped, and his life was over after they exposed him. Hi, Anthony Darren. Hi, Anthony, watching from Glasgow, Scotland. Did you ever come across any Scottish tough guys on the street? No, I'm sorry, I didn't. Irish, not Scottish. I'm sure there are. Thanks, Ray, for the donation. I appreciate that. Ryan Brown, 1983. That's a good year. That's the year my son was born. Anthony, did you have accountability did you have an accountability partner in recovery? I do. It helps me. I had a sponsor. And I had a really, really strong support group. I had a really good sponsor. The picture that I have on my social media today, that was my sponsor. That was a trip we took to, that was in Atlantis in the Bahamas. We went on the trip with our wives, and his wife actually took that picture, Joyce. He was a good guy. I didn't start writing steps until I was in prison. And I wrote my first fourth step in Attica. And it was hard to do that in a jail cell, but I wanted the pain to go away so bad, and I wrote a fourth step and I mailed it home to him. At that point, I didn't care who read it. I put it in the mailbox open. I didn't give a shit. And he drove 9 hours with his wife to Attica, and we did my fifth step in the visiting room. So that's without stuff like that happening in my life, I would have never made it to 37 years. I'm not wishing you the best from SPLFDMA. Thank you. Let's see. From Spaz, is it true Cafe Liberty is back? Yes, it is. Very true. Could you believe it? From Florida, 1963. Hi, Anthony. Whatever happened to Willie Boy's son, Johnny Boy Johnson? Thank you. That's a good question. He had a son and a daughter. when I was a little kid, he was around my old man when I was a little kid, and he was a bookmaker, and every 2 weeks, my father would take me, and we would go by his house in Brooklyn. I remember he lived across the street from a school, and I used to play with his daughter and his son. The three of us used to play together. And then my father and him had a falling out, and my father chased him, and then he winded up. Charlie grabbed him. Charlie Wagons grabbed him, and that's how he winded up around John. But he knew all of them, of course. But when my father chased him, my father actually hit him on the head with it. To be perfectly honest, my father hit him on the head with a car jack, and almost killed him. And he had a scar on his head, and he used to tell me, "You see this scar, Fat Andy did this to me." My father cracked him on the head with a jack of a car. But they made up after that, a while after that, and God only knows the information he gave on my father and Tony Lee. And yeah, I used to play with them. I don't know what happened to them. That's a good question. I wish I knew. I would assume they're still in New York. I don't know why they wouldn't be. They're not kids anymore. I mean, they got to be. I'm in my 70s. They got to be my age. Or close to my age anyway, because he would have been in his 80s now, so they have to be a little younger than me. Let's see what else we got. Raj, thank you again for the donation. Another donation, I appreciate it. Anthony, I got inspired. I got inspired by your story and stopped smoking cold turkey 1 week clean. Congratulations. Listen, smoking was the hardest thing I ever did. Harder than giving up the drugs and the alcohol. I feel for smokers because I know what it is to put them things down. And I put them down in jail because I didn't want to get sick in there. And I went crazy for 2 weeks, crazy out of my mind for 2 weeks before I put them down. I mean, before it went away, and I haven't smoked. The last time I smoked a cigarette was September 29th, 1997 was the last time I smoked a cigarette. See what we got. Okay, your dad's name was Anthony. JD, I'm sure I know them. I mean, if you can, send a picture to my email, and I'll get back to you definitely. And if I, because I'm sure I know them. If I'm positive I have to know them, I just can't place them. Let's see what else we got. James, can you talk about Tato? Tato was with my own man when they were kids in the Anastasia days. Sammy, Sammy the Bull was with Tato. He straightened out Sammy the Bull. He made Sammy his acting captain. He was a tough guy, gangster, made a lot of money. Allegedly, he sided with Carlo Gambino against Anastasia. Allegedly, he was the person that killed Tommy Rava, who was their captain. So he was a treacherous guy. Detroit. Hey, Detroit, what's going on? I was out there for a while. I guess you know me from back in the day when I was in Michigan, when I showed up at the meetings, dropped out of the sky, as Mike M says. All right, I'm going to answer one more. I'm losing my voice, and I have to go to work today. So before I answer the last question, please join my Patreon, because I don't want to go to work. I don't want to work 8 hours a day anymore. I'm going to answer this in one other one from Spaz Torah, I hope. 88. Oh, this is a guy who grew up. This is from Spaz. I wish I knew who you were. Wow, grew up on 88th and Liberty, and I remember all those guys sitting out in front of the club. Yeah, 88th and Liberty. That's we actually had a club on 88th and Liberty after Tony Lee got bought out of when Tony got pinched in the airport. Frank DeWap and everybody. He wasn't allowed to go to Cafe Liberty, so we opened up another club for him right on 88th and Liberty. So we were there all the time. Um, what does 37 years clean prove to you and to anyone watching? That anybody could do it. You do it a day at a time, and you get a support group. You got make meetings, change your behaviors, change people, places, and things. It's all about change. That's the key to the whole thing. Change, change, and change. All right, this is the last one. Jaden, such a huge fan from Boston. Your storytelling me is unbelievable. I never was able to see one of your lives until after it was over. This is great. I appreciate it, Jaden. I really do. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And don't forget, if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget, please check out my Patreon. Become a member. I got a lot of great content on there, a lot of content coming your way. I'm about ready to go into the studio with Louis Casman and do some real good stuff. I'm making plans to get back up to New York. I got a real interesting tour in mind. I don't want to give it away right now, but it's going to be at locations where nobody has gone to yet to do a tour of. So it's going to be something really interesting, and I'm sure you're going to like it. So thank you. Thanks for all the congratulations. I appreciate the love,